Hey guys, it's Adam. It's Monday, so here is your minister's moment. I thought I wanted to share an article with you guys today, a little bit different than we normally do for one of these minister's moments. It's come from a place that I've gone here recently, and kind of realizing that we're going to be going through this COVID-19 epidemic for longer than originally I anticipated, at least, or maybe just hoped it wouldn't be as long as it's going to be. So I've recently done some research on how have Christians responded to epidemics and plagues and things like that in the past. And important to note that there is a big difference between an epidemic, which what we're going through right now, and a plague, which is like the bubonic plague and things where the death toll of a virus or disease is much, much higher than what we're dealing with right now. But there are some similarities that I have found on how Christians have responded. And I'm going to, kind of quote a few excerpts here from an article that I found. I'll share it in the link below. It's from foreignpolicy.com. It's titled "Christianity Has Been Handling Epidemics for 2,000 Years." And we have. When we have teachings like "do unto others as you would have them do unto you," and "love your neighbor as yourself." When we see something going on where there is a need, where people are hurting, they are sick, they're in pain. I think of Matthew 25. When Jesus says, "You looked after them, you looked after me." All these things we are called to respond to need in the community and in lives around us. That going back to one of Rusty's minister's moments, we are called to respond and not to react. We are, as Mitch said Sunday, we are called to live in the tensions and live in the tough times. We're not called to kind of live on the sidelines and watch the world, in hurt and in pain and in need, and not respond to that. And so I wanted to share this with you, a couple excerpts from this. These have been challenging to me as I try to respond appropriately in a way that Jesus does, would in this kind of a situation. And so this may spark some discussion amongst us here, but I think that this Christians in the past have made some good points and have looked at things a little differently, perhaps, than we do today. So the first thing is there's three things that really respond, or the ways Christians have responded to epidemics and plagues in the past. The first one of those is we care for the sick, believer or non-believer alike, even at the risk of our own lives. The Christian response to plagues begins with some of Jesus' most famous teachings. I mentioned those a little bit ago. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Even greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Put plainly, the Christian ethic in a time of plague considers that our own life must always be regarded as less important than that of our neighbor. The famous Martin Luther lived through the bubonic plague. And in 1527, when the plague hit Wittenberg, where he was, he refused calls to flee the city and protect himself. I mean, Martin Luther, pretty important at the time, big guy doing a lot of, creating a lot of waves for Christianity, challenging believers in what they believe, how they respond to the world. But rather he stayed and he himself ministered to the sick. The refusal to flee cost his daughter Elizabeth her life. But he produced a tract called "Whether Christians Should Flee the Plague," where Luther provides a clear articulation of the Christian epidemic response. We die at our posts. Christian doctors cannot abandon their hospitals. Christian governors cannot flee their districts. Christian leaders cannot abandon their congregations. We don't run. The plague does not dissolve our duties. It turns them to crosses on which we must be prepared to die. I like that. Our response to bad times in this world, we are the ones that understand that there is more to this world, much more to this world, and to eternity than other people do. And so our response to that in the face of possible death, we understand there's more to this. which comes to the second thing, that while we care for the sick, we do our best not to infect the healthy. The Christian motive for hygiene and sanitation does not arise in self-preservation, but in an ethic of service to our neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Early Christians actually created the first hospitals in Europe as hygienic places to provide care during times of plague, on the understanding that they thought that negligence that spread disease further was in fact murder. That's a little extreme, but that's what they thought. That's what they believed, that if you contributed to the death of somebody else, that you were in fact guilty of murder. Now, that's something we could argue. I don't know that, I'm not saying that God believes that, but early Christians believed that if you contributed to the death of somebody else, that was shame on you. And so it brings up the idea of one of our favorite topics these days, of masks. The ubiquitous surgical masks may not actually prevent infection, 100% obviously, but they serve as a visible reminder that we're all watching each other's backs. When good sanitary procedure stops being about saving our own skin and starts being about loving our neighbor, it becomes not just life-saving, but soul-enlivening. It is encouraging. I did a poll at the beginning of all this kind of craziness of, when you see somebody wearing a mask, did that bring you comfort or did that bring you anxiety? And at the beginning of this, it brought a lot of people anxiety, I think, because we all, again, wanted to be like, oh, this is not going to be a big deal. It's not going to be as deadly as we think it is. It's not going to be as easily spread. And there was a reality of the first time you see somebody wearing a mask out at a public place, that, oh, this is real. This is here. But now I feel like it can be very encouraging to a lot of people. I know it's kind of a hot button topic of a lot of us, including myself for a while, was really resistant to wearing a mask. But when it's a reminder of, say, hey, I've got you in mind. I see you as somebody that I don't want to get sick. I want to look after you. I want to help you. And in helping you, I don't want to get you sick. I can get that. So that's the second thing. While we care for the sick, we do our best not to infect the healthy. And the third thing was really, we didn't stop meeting. We didn't stop worshiping together. And that was from an understanding that without work, without school, without public gatherings, sports, hobbies, even just the outside world at all, humans do very poorly. We need the moral and mental support of communities to be the decent people we all aspire to be. They, held, and we do too, but they held their gatherings at church very highly, and saw them as very important. And they would avoid doing other things. They would forego other activities and take great pains to be as clean as possible, so that they could meaningfully gather to support each other. And these are some interesting ideas. This was an article back in March 13th of this year, and I wish I had found it kind of back then. It's a little eye-opening for me. I'm how we respond to this epidemic. One thing that has been shown is that by doing these three things, be eager to sacrifice for others, even at the cost of your own life. Obsessively maintain a scrupulous hygienic routine to avoid infecting others, and maintain a lifeline to a meaningful human community that can care for your mind and soul. By doing these three things in the past, the church exploded, guys. The world sees us respond to people in need, and they like that. They see that. Maybe that's something that can happen this time too, is maybe the church can explode if we all get together and we all look after each other and care for our neighbors and treat each other as we would want somebody to treat us. Some food for thought this morning, guys. Love you, miss you. Let's all do what we can. Looking even back at history and the way Christians have responded to these kind of things before. We're going to be judged by how we respond too. The world's going to look at us and see us and be like, hey, those Christians care, or those Christians are really selfish and they don't care much about other people. We need to consider how we respond to that. Let's get out there. Let's love our neighbor. Let's treat other people the way we want them to be treated, or the way we would want them to treat us. And remind ourselves that greater love has no man than this, than he should lay down for his life for his friends. Love you guys. See you next time.